against all others. So others are aliens. If they come into your country, they are treated as aliens. They are not given the same rights. We don't believe in nationalism. Not because we are Muslims, but because we are Africans. There is hardly a national barrier, a cultural barrier between ourselves and our neighbors here in Africa. All religions, Christianity and Islam, tell you to be nice to your neighbor and to be close to him. So we would like to organize regional connections with all African countries around us. If powerful European countries are now closing up in a community, Africans, which are very poor, of course, need more community and regional organization than yesterday. And also, anyone who comes into our country, even if he's not a Muslim, let alone Muslims who come to us, they are welcome to come in. If they want to stay here, they can stay. If they want to become nationalized and have full rights, they can have those full rights. So those frontiers are not finite, ultimate limitations of our connection, human relations to human beings.
What lessons do you offer other Muslim countries who want to follow your path?
Well, the lesson is that if the Sudan, which is a weaker country, historically and materially, is proceeding towards Islam and thereby reconciling between government and the values of society, I think that every other Muslim should do it that way. We can never have a representative government in any Muslim country if it doesn't become an Islamic government. We can never have an Islamic economic system where all the Muslims are religiously mobilized to develop the country, and not only to develop it, but also to ensure that across their development they have a system of equality and of justice in economic. They can't have that except if they mobilize themselves Islamically. And I advise that every Muslim country to proceed peacefully, and not necessarily by conflict between the people who wants to assert Islam and a government which wants to dictate another alien system and impose it on a Muslim society.
What freedom of choice do citizens have in your Islamic state? What happens to the secular dimension of life?
Well, we don't know a section of life which is not religious. If people do believe in God, whether they are Christians or Muslims, they have to believe that God is omnipresent. He is not only a dominant force inside the church or inside the mosque. Once you leave the door, you are absolutely free there, and God is not existent anymore. No. Whatever Islam teaches has been taught by all religion, Judaism or Christianity, that religion is a comprehensive way of life, and God is a divine, absolute guide of your life everywhere. Whether you are an artist, art should be a religious vocation, not for the sake of art, but a religious practice. Economic pursuits should be also related to God. Power, political power is not just a satisfaction of one's own will for ultimate, absolute power for his selfish interests, but no, it's an act of worship. And it's like rituals, it's like prayer. All life is a pursuit of submission to God. This actually was once Christianity, and this was Judaism, and this was Islam. The word Islam itself does not describe the message of Muhammad. It describes the messages of Abraham, Moses, Jesus Christ, and Muhammad all together.
Are you not talking about a centralized state?
Not at all. It's a society where the society is much more important than the state. It's not a totalitarian state. No, because most of the religious values are not legalized. They are not enforced by legal sanction, by the police power, by the judicial power. In a more perfect society, the state is reduced, the government is reduced to a very little dimension.
What is the role of democracy in your model of the Islamic State?
More democratic than the democratic model of the West. And
free market?
A freer market, but a more equal and just market than the market of the West today. But it's something much similar than the socialist market of yesterday.
And minimum government?
Minimum government, that's right. Minimum government. The more perfect society becomes, the less government has to do.
How does all that differ from the conservatives, say, for example? That's what they say.
Well, the conservatives, preserve much of their original traditional custom. But in Islam is a religion of renewal. It's not a system that is obsessed by custom. Today we may represent Islam or reflect it through certain customs and traditions. But Islam teaches us that constantly we should renew our life and move away from traditional customs if they no longer represent our values. So the values will be eternal, but our customs, our practices, our procedures are just contemporary, are not permanent. So we are not conservative. We are liberals all the time, renewing our lives, so to speak.
Why have all the Islamic states in recent times turned out to be authoritarian and very dictatorial?
It's not because they are Islamic at all. They represent the legacy of the imperial history. When we were governed by these imperial powers, we were governed by completely authoritative, dictatorial foreign governments. And the national governments took over to continue the legacy of authoritarian rule. They never returned to Islam. Because Islam means that whoever takes power is not powerful, absolutely powerful. He surrenders power to the people who surrender it to God in due course. So if the government is authoritarian, it means that it's not Islamic. If it's hereditary, it means that it's not Islamic at all.
Is your Islamic state a single party state?
Even in the West now, parties are not as important as they used to be a few decades back. There is hardly a difference today between one party and the other, because socialism, at one time, capitalism used to represent quite different programs. But now in England or in America, there is hardly a difference between one party and the other. There are just two groups competing for power, but there is hardly a difference over the program now. So democracy is not always a partisan democracy.
Would you, for example, allow a number of different parties, maybe Marxist, communist, capitalist?
I don't think that political parties will develop in such a society. There will be different trends, but no one will stand with a group and adhere to it entirely and vote with it consistently in whatever ratio. You would not have such a thing at all.
What about the status of non-Muslims in your Islamic state?
Oh, this is not an issue in Islam, because Islam from day one has established a different system altogether, because the Medina state established by the Prophet himself was a state of Muslims and Jews. And the constitution itself was drawn by both these communities together. And the Jews lived there. They were given complete freedom of belief and complete freedom of culture, even immunities in the legal system.
Are the rights of the minorities preserved in your Islamic state?
It guarantees basic rights to non-Muslims. Unfortunately, although Europe went secular, but it never guarantees full rights for Muslims today. You can't have a Friday off in England or in France, but here the non-Muslim can have a Sunday off, a Muslim will have a Friday off. You can't have that. You can't have your personal law in England or in Germany or in America. It's a personal law based on Christian tradition, a monogamous personal law based on Christian tradition. But Muslims are not recognized as such. They have to abide by that law. But here in this country, we allow non-Muslims to have their own personal law. We consider that personal law is part of personal life. It's part of your complete freedom. It's like your belief. It's like your ritual acts of worship. You are free to observe any value there. So a non-Muslim here, we will ask him, what is your church? What is your custom, if he's a pagan? But you never find that level of freedom, of religious freedom in any country in the world, not even in the West. Not even in the West. Even if a young girl in France puts a scarf on her head, you know what happened in France. There was an uproar by the whole of France. This is something against our culture. But not in the Sudan. She can dress the way she wants to dress. She can marry the one she wants to marry.
Can a non-Muslim get in a position of power?
There is absolutely no bar against a non-Muslim participation in any public office or in any public government service or public office. It's just the fact that since the majority of the country are Muslims, like the majority in any country, they will choose their leader from someone who represents them. but the other one can stand as a candidate.
Now, is your Islamic State the Islamic State or just an Islamic State?
As an Islamic State, I don't think that it is the Islamic State. I would like tomorrow to join any other country which seeks to become Islamic, in a bigger Islamic State, because we are all Muslims, we are part of the Ummah. And in the future, I would love to see the whole Ummah getting together and exchanging its economic life and its political consultation, political life. And actually, I look forward to the time when humanity can get close to each other, and I could deal with it. Human beings, whatever the country is, or whatever their ethnic origin is, or their color is, or whatever their religion is, actually. But my ultimate level is a global human state, which allows Muslims and non-Muslims to coexist and equally, and to represent their values, and through dialogue to exchange their values, so to speak.
Would that not be an authoritarian state under Muslim?
It's not at all authoritarian, because a Muslim state is not authoritarian, because the authority is absolutely submitted to God, and that is the meaning, exactly the literal meaning of Islam. Islam means submission. So you submit all power to God. It means that there is no authoritarian authority, worldly authority at all.
But Sudan is a military dictatorship.
This year they promised that they will hold election in all states of the Sudan, federated states of the Sudan. Next year there will be national elections. Power will be determined by the free option of the people. The president will be elected privately, freely, and the parliament will be elected freely.
Why is it necessary for Sudan to become an Islamic state?
History has taught us that it's very poor, actually, to depart from Islam. The country since independence have had about 6 unstable governments. We couldn't run a government in this country. We have tried socialist governments, we have tried capitalist governments, we have tried democracy, we have tried dictatorship, military dictatorships. It has done nothing. Neither to settle our civil war in the south, our regional differences, our tribalism, neither to develop our country at all, because we have gone. This is a very rich potential of agriculture in the world, but we have almost gone hungry in this country because of the poverty of economic administration. There has been no freedom in this country. Government, even under democracy, have been monopolized by 2 families only, by 1 person in each family. So we have had no taste of freedom and national unity. You have no taste of social peace. No taste of economic development and prosperity. We tried to imitate the West, the political form, the economic form, then we reverted to become socialist, the political form, the economic form. We found nothing. So history has taught us that we have to be original, and we have to go back to our original system, our original value.
How has the establishment of the Islamic State solved the problem of the civil war in the south?
Yes, because for the first time we have offered not only the South, but every province in the Sudan a system of federation. This has never been allowed before. But federation is a very ancient tradition in Islam. The Prophet himself federated the Medina. He allowed the Jews, the different tribes of the Jews, to have their own separate states. And even the Muslims themselves had more than one community. So we have taken this example as a model, and we have offered federation for the first time. And we have decentralized the Sharia. Nimeri, when he applied the Sharia, he generalized this as a national law, like the British law in this country. It used to be a national law for the whole Sudan. But now the Sharia is applied only in northern Sudan, because it's predominantly almost 98% Muslims. In the south there are as many Muslims as there are Christians, but there are more pagans than both of them. We have allowed the south to be exempted from the application of the Sharia. This is a new offer to the south.
Now, whenever one talks about Sharia, 2 issues arise: punishment and women. Now, are not Sharia laws oppressive to women and brutal about punishment?
What about the crime of theft in England or in America? If you consider it, I mean, generally, most of the thieves take out their arms and then move into an area, and the police would come there with their arms. Many people are killed. You know, if you take a crime in the West now, it's an area where the West shows only complete failure in dealing with it. It's constantly on the increase, not only as ordinary crime, but as a crime of violence. And many people are killed either by the thieves or by the police or in defense thereof. We have had more than a year and a half now of criminal law in the Sudan. There are only 2 cases which were ultimately passed as cases worthy of that capital punishment of theft. And that is one thing. With respect to women in this country, women were liberalized in this country not by the influx of Western women liberation movements, by Islam in this country. Because it was the Islamic movement and Islamic trends in this country that liberated women and moved them back to the mosque. They were not allowed to go there, moved them into public life. And they were given also political rights. They are now members of parliament. Some of them are ministers, some of them are ambassadors, some of them are judges in this country.
So would you allow women dressed in Western fashion walking in the street at 12 o'clock at night?
We have no legal prohibition of any form of dress. Muslims are advised morally, not legally, to dress properly, like a sister in a Christian church. That's the ideal dress even in a Christian context. We observe the same rules because we are just about as religious as Christians used to be once. But of course, even a Muslim woman, I mean, if she doesn't dress properly, I mean, she's not taken to a court because there is no legal, of course, unless she goes completely naked, anyone, of course. That's the law against obscenity everywhere in the world, I mean, it's like that. But the dress here is not regulated by law. It's regulated by morality.
Some Western organizations are arguing that the human rights records of the Sudan have become worse since you have become an Islamic state.
But some of the representatives even here confess that they are not using an absolute standard because they know that there are other countries very close to the Sudan where political detention is 1,000 times more than in the Sudan, where people who are killed by police forces, a violent police action, are 10 times more than anybody in the Sudan. There is much more injustice around the Sudan, but they just don't like the Sudan going Islamic. So they use these pretexts simply and they abuse the criteria simply to suppress the Sudan.
Do you think there will be perpetual conflict between Islamic values and secularist liberal values?
Well, there will be some difference, but I think that it is quite fair, that in human culture there should be many different options. Democracy itself is a recognition that people are free to differ. And they are free to express themselves peacefully and to entertain a dialogue with each other. So we cannot organize the whole world according to one standard imposed by the West of religion, of economic systems, of political systems, of cultural systems. That is not going to be a democratic arrangement for humanity. If we recognize for a single country to become multiplicity of views, in a democracy, how can we refuse it for mankind altogether? So we should allow Muslims, Christians, Jews, pagans to